Hey guys, what's up? Today I got another advice video for y'all, so it's geared more towards people who are just starting out in the language learning world. It's also somewhat of a compliment to a previous advice video I did about a year and a half ago talking about grammatical peculiarities to watch out for when learning a language. Now we're moving away from the closed classes and into the open classes, those being nouns, adjectives, and verbs, as this video is all about situations where one word from your native language may translate to two or more words in your target language, and vice versa. Vocabulary doesn't always have a one-to-one correspondence between languages, and this can often cause confusion for native-speaking listeners, resulting in some of the funniest exchanges I've ever had when trying to speak in L2. I'm just gonna present the words and talk about how some languages split them up into multiple concepts and, of course, give examples. The words will mostly be in the order they're written on my personal vocab list, so it's not gonna be like in increasing order of importance or anything like that, but I will try to keep it to the more common words and the more common distinctions. With that out of the way, let's go! So we're going to start with a set of adjectives that describe height, or length. That's right, we're talking about short and tall. First off, short. A lot of languages actually differentiate between the word they use to call things short and the word to call people short, which often coincides with the difference between length and height. For example, Spanish and Hebrew, which will both be somewhat overrepresented in this video, both differentiate, as Spanish has corto for length and bajo for height, while Hebrew has katzal for length and namuch for height. Here's a list of how the other languages I've studied to this point do this. Also, the word could have a third definition regarding being short in time, but that normally gets absorbed by the length meaning. Interestingly, while English doesn't differentiate between the meanings on the lesser degree, just using the word short, it does differentiate on the other end, using long for length and tall for height. Spanish and Hebrew both do this as well, but not all languages do. Arabic, for one, just has the word tawil for both. And here are the other examples. On a similar note, the adjectives describing age also often differentiate based on whether a living being or a thing is being described. On the more recent side, I think every language I've ever studied makes the distinction between new for non-living things and young for living things. Here's the chart of that, and if you do happen to know a language that uses the same word for both concepts, please tell me in the comments, I would love to know. But if there's no issue here, why'd I even bring it up? Because on the other end with the word old, it's a different story. As seen in English, just one word is used for both concepts, old. Same goes for Spanish with viejo, Swedish with gammal, and Polish with stary. But plenty of other languages do make the distinction between things and people here, like Hebrew with yashan and zaken, Arabic with qadim and kabir, which also means big, Hungarian with regi and idush, and Telugu with pata and musari. So here's the actually relevant chart for these concepts. Next up, I'll just talk broadly about colors. Linguistic color theory is a very common topic when people are talking about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, as literal disagreements about the boundaries of the color wheel are very appealing to people who support the hypothesis, which states that the languages you know literally affect your perception of reality, like in that video where people from the Himba tribe of Namibia took a color test and it went very differently from how it would go for English speakers. There are also theories about the order in which societies start differentiating between colors. Some of y'all may have seen a chart that looks like this before, either on YouTube or in a college anthropology class, or both. Its universality has been brought into question as of late though. But like, you know how English differentiates between red and pink? Yeah, not all languages do that, and a lot of time when they do, the word is something like rose-colored, indicating it was somewhat of an afterthought. Also, I feel obligated to mention that this doesn't make pink an illegitimate color in those languages. All color words come from somewhere, even if you have to go back thousands of years to find it. However, some languages do the same thing with the color blue. Russian, Polish, and Italian all have one word for darker blue, respectively sini, niebieski, and blue, and another word for lighter blue, respectively голубой, błękitny, and azzurro. So stuff like that can happen. Now we're on to some nouns, starting with names for human settlements. Some languages, English, Spanish, and Hebrew included, differentiate between smaller populated areas and the larger ones where most of the commerce happens. I'm of course talking about the difference between town or village and city, which in Spanish are pueblo and ciudad, and in Hebrew are kfar and ir. But a lot of other languages don't particularly care about the size of a settlement. For example, they're both stad in Swedish, város in Hungarian, and góret in Russian, although they may use its diminutive gradok to refer to a town. Here are the other examples. Now we have an example with particular relevance to me because there's a story behind why I will never screw up these words again. I'm talking about sign, which has at least two main meanings. There's a physical sign, which in Hebrew is sheret, and then there's the more abstract sign, like a sign of things to come, which in Hebrew is siman. The word can also be split into a lot more meanings, but I really don't have time for all that. But yeah, I was at summer camp in 2016 and wanted to ask a counselor if we needed to be standing at the sign for our bunk. So I said in Hebrew, "Anachnu tzrichim liot basiman," to which my counselor was like, "Huh?" I tried repeating a few times before just saying it in English, to which he was like, "Oh yeah, shit it." I'd literally just asked my counselor, "Should we be at the Omen?" So yeah, if you're worried about embarrassing second language stories, don't be, we all have them. Here's the chart with the other languages. Alright, so now look at this picture. Is this one body part or two? Well, that depends on what language you're speaking, of course, so now it's time to talk about limbs. As shown here, arm and hand can sometimes be considered part of the same body part. For example, in Russian they're both ruka, and in Telugu they're both chei. Here's all the other examples. However, what seems to be even more common cross-linguistically is not differentiating between leg and foot. Hebrew, for example, just has regel for both, Amharic just has igir, and Russian, like before, just has naga for both, although interestingly, it does have a word for foot, stapa, but it's only used if you absolutely must clarify that you're just talking about the foot. This is in contrast to Polish, which actually does have mandatory distinction between noga, leg, and stopa, foot. Here are the other examples. On a similar note, fingers and toes actually very often don't get distinguished either. Most of the time, toes are just called fingers of the foot. Speaking of time, that's our next word of interest, and it's an important one. English is actually rare in how wide the definition of time is, making it no wonder it's the most common noun in the language. Most other languages have at least two words meaning time, one used for time like the inevitable passing of events, like I'm out of time, and one used for time like an instance where something happens like I told them 7 times, and they're not interchangeable at all. It'll actually be a lot shorter to tell you the languages I've studied that don't differentiate this. English with time, as mentioned, Amharic with gize, and that's it. All other languages I've studied make this distinction. Spanish has tiempo en vez, Hebrew has zman and pam, French has ton and fois, Arabic has wat and marra, Swedish has ti and gong, Polish has chas and ras, Hungarian has ide and alkolom, and I think you get the point. The other examples are here too. Now we've reached the verbs, so we'll talk about some basic verbs of motion which can vary in meaning distribution across languages. First off, walk and go are sometimes differentiated, but not always. Furthermore, in some languages they don't have an individual word for go, but they do have a mandatory distinction between going on foot and going by vehicle. In Russian, for example, if you're going on foot, it's ichi, and if by vehicle, it's yechich instead. Of course, this is egregiously oversimplified. Russian verbs of motion are insanely complicated. I had a segment about this in the Russian language overview. Hebrew is similar, but with less complication. The verb lalechet means both walk and go, but the rule about not using it for vehicle travel isn't as strict as it is in Russian. But for that purpose, there's also the verb linsoa, which means travel. So now, less about walking and more about talking. That's right, we're about to talk about talking, speaking, saying, and telling. But what's interesting is that even this is much more than most languages do. Most of the time, there are only two verbs, one that maps onto talk and speak, and one that maps onto say and tell. The semantic distinctions are a bit tricky though, so pause to read if you want. Anyway, the two-way distinction between a more broad connotation, talk and speak, and a more careful connotation, say and tell, seems to be the most common distribution of vocabulary, like in Spanish with hablar and decir, Russian with gvarich and skazach, Amharic with menager and malet, Hungarian with besel and mund, and so on. I actually find it pretty interesting that this specific distinction is so widespread. The only language I've studied that doesn't even make this distinction is Polish, which uses mówić for both. Yes, there's also powiedzieć, but that's just the perfective aspect form, which happens to be suppleted in this case. Here's the list of words. Next up, we have the word live. A good number of languages differentiate between, for example, live dangerously and I live in the northern hemisphere. The first one describes the general experience of life, while the second one describes your home location. Two very different things if you ask me. Nonetheless, English isn't alone in not distinguishing them, as there's also Spanish with vivir and Russian with żyć. But most of the other languages I've studied do have different words for the two concepts, like how Hebrew has lichot for the experience, but lagul for location. Other examples are French vivre versus habiter, Icelandic liva versus bua, and Polish żyć versus mieszkać. Here are the rest of them. Now it's time to talk about like and love. Different languages may have two or even more ways to qualify their appreciation for someone or something. As is the case in English, the difference is simply on degree. Liking someone isn't as extreme as loving them. That being said, not all languages have this distinction, as Hebrew just uses leov for both, French just has aimer, and Hungarian just has seret. By the way, I'm not really focusing on hyperformal or informal alternative, just the main terms. I'd say the like versus love distinction is more common though, like in Swedish gilla versus älska, Russian nравится, cases reversed, versus lubić, and confusingly, Polish lubić versus kochać, as well as Telugu ishtam, cases reversed, versus premiciu. Spanish actually does a bit more, as there's just gustar, cases reversed, for like, but for love, Spanish differentiates further between amar, which is romantic love, and querer, which is used for platonic love, and also means want, by the way. Here's a somewhat simplified chart. Next up, we'll talk about winning and losing. Both of these words have one meaning to do with the results of a game, either literal or metaphorical, and the other to do with something else. For win, the alternative meaning is about earning something, and for lose, the other meaning is about no longer having something. There are some languages where those are the same, like in Spanish with ganar for win and perder for lose. But in Hebrew, for example, both those words are split up according to the aforementioned differences in meaning. For sports in Hebrew, win is lenatzeach and lose is lafsid. But to talk about winning a thing, you use lizkot, and if you lose a thing, it's labed. Here are the other examples for win and for lose. Finally, we have the word that I used in the grammar video as an example of what I wouldn't be discussing back then, but will be discussing here, no. Chances are you've come across this example in a language class before, as it seems to be a favorite of language teachers when they describe the topic of this video, but it is important to know, so yeah, the two concepts within this one English word are whether you know a fact or you've met a person. The latter is sometimes defined as having familiarity. The only languages I've studied that don't differentiate between the meanings are English with no, Russian with znach, Amharic with mawik, and Telugu with the similar sounding telusu. Arabic is a trickier situation as most of the dialects use araf for both meanings, but modern standard Arabic only uses it for people while using alam for the facts. The rest of the languages do have different words for the concepts, with Spanish, for example, using saber for facts and conocer for people. Otherwise, there's also Hebrew ladat versus lakir, French savoir versus connaître, Dutch weten versus kennen, Polish wiedzieć versus znać, and Hungarian tud, which also means can, versus ismer. Here's the chart as usual, but I do want to point something out. In all three of the instances here where there was a clearly observable merger of the meanings into one word, English, Arabic, and Russian, the word that previously referred to people won out. This is likely because people really hate being referred to with words used for objects, so it's much easier for the people word to start being used for things than it is for the thing word to start referring to people. Also, fun historical linguistics fact, the English and Russian words are surprisingly cognates. So that's it. Those are 13 situations that, as a language learner, you need to watch out for because the distribution of vocabulary may be different than what you're used to. Of course, keep in mind that I tried to keep it to the basics in this video and that a lot of the time the situation is much more complicated than I was able to describe. But do you have any other examples? Drop them in the comments. Also, consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching.